how to survive and thrive in data science in the era of AI engineer, basically API ensembler. Because I realized if you can make people laugh in presentation, it's easier for them to learn. When artists create art from their heart, they want to build a perfect platform that maybe in the future other people can use. Someone does something that make you feel uncomfortable. This happened to me, reschedule meetings 10 times. Hello everyone, this is Daliana. Today's episode is a little different because the guest is myself. So I got interviewed on one of the largest data science podcasts, Super Data Science with Jon Kron. We recorded this last summer and I gave an update on what I learned about myself during a career break and why I paused this podcast. The goal of this episode is to provide practical advice on how you can navigate a change in data science and AI industry to accelerate your career. We also talked about my career coaching program, where I help tech leads get stakeholder buy-in, create more impact, and build influence at work and in the industry. The name of the course might have changed, but the content only gets better. You can learn more using the links below. All right, enjoy the conversation.
Daliana, a rock star in our midst. Welcome to this Super Data Science podcast. Where are you calling in from today, Daliana?
At this moment, I'm in Austin, Texas.
Nice. And you might be visiting Kenji in Austin, is that right?
Yeah, I saw Kenji last month and I visited his studio. It was really cool.
He's got a studio?
He has a studio at home. Yeah.
Wow. Oh, that's cool. And so Ken was an episode. If people don't know Ken, he's huge on YouTube, although also recently announced that he is not doing data science content creation as much or at all anymore. So that's what he built his data science, hundreds of thousands of YouTube subscribers on the basis of his data science expertise. But I guess I watched a video recently that he published of he's moving into sports.
Yeah, sports analytics. That's something he always have been working on. Yeah, I think as a content creator, every couple of years, everyone has this pivot moment. And we'll get to it later. I think I just went through a moment when I realized I need to pivot.
Yes, in fact, that's pretty much where we're starting. I just wanted to quickly, before we do that, I want to say thanks to Ken or Harpreet Sahota. We're not sure. Daliana and I can't tell. We can't remember for sure. We've been connected for years, following each other for years. Filming this episode has been in the works for a long time. Maybe I'll be on your data scientist show, which we'll talk about later in the show.
Definitely.
As well in this podcast episode. Harpreet, he was on this podcast most recently in episode number 693. Kenji was in episode number 555. Both of them outstanding content creators and amazing connectors, just so friendly, always happy to make additional connections. And so between one of those two people, I guess, some years ago. So let's talk about that transition. You were, until recently, a full-time data scientist. You were a senior data scientist at a fast-growing AI startup called Predabase. And prior to that, you were at a little-known company called Amazon Web Services. And you have publicly stated, and so I hope it's all right that I'm mentioning this on air, that you were burnt out doing that on top of all the content creation you're doing. So you quit the full-time data scientist role, you pivoted to being full-time focused on career coaching and your podcast. So tell us about that transition.
Yeah, so the whole content creation journey started around 2020. I think around that time, there are more data scientist roles and people are very confused about what do data scientists do. And people think as a data scientist, you do A/B testing, machine learning, everything, deep learning. And there are not a lot of people talking about what do we actually do? What are the frustrations we have as data science, machine learning practitioners? So I started content creation on LinkedIn. Around that time, I also got promoted to a senior data scientist at AWS, building machine learning solutions for a lot of customers in the sports industry. So it was very exciting. You get to learn different type of business and different type of models. Since 2020, I've always created content on LinkedIn, and I started my own podcast, The Data Scientist Show. So, over 3 years, it felt like I had two jobs. at my day job, I'm a data scientist, and then I need to think about writing, editing, coming out with new ideas, and later trying to keep up with the weekly publishing schedule definitely feel like a grind. Last year, around September, I left my full-time job as a data scientist because the podcast was growing and is doing really well. And I also started to collaborate with other data and AI companies to co-create educational content. And I was doing that for about a year. And you can say my role switched from a practitioner to podcaster, content creator. My customers are the business, and I'm an educator. So maybe I didn't talk about a lot on LinkedIn. I also started a career coaching course on Maven. So it was a live course. Because it was the first time I launched this course, I only promoted once. I had about 10 people joined, and I want to really give people the experience. And then I realized, although I went overtime every time, I didn't make a lot of money compared to the business I built around creating educational content, doing partnerships with other tech companies, but I felt very fulfilled. I really enjoy giving people advice. And what I noticed sometimes when I'm on a Uber, a lot of Uber driver, they're going through career transitions and then they are scared of trying something. I just feel I want to give them advice. And then that lead to the feeling, oh, maybe I need to take a break to figure out what I really want to do, because doing career coaching, doing weekly content, and also working on those partnership conversations, a lot of negotiation. You need to think about delivering results, meeting their community, their marketing goals. So I think that's the moment I realized maybe I was a little burned out.
Yeah, that does sound like a lot. And so those Maven courses, they are like live training. They're not recorded sessions. And we're going to talk about. I don't know if you have multiple courses or just the one. Advance your data science career with proven strategies. Is that the one, or do you have multiple of those?
It's a one course. So last year I called it Advance Your Data Science Career. It's the same course, but now I added more content. I call it How to Survive and Thrive in Data Science in the era of AI, because the data science landscape has changed. Although
Mhm.
I stopped my podcast, but I had a lot of off the record conversation with practitioners, and I know sometimes some job requirement is different, while some functions still remain the same. And also, I realize a lot of data scientists are scared about layoffs. So they also want to know how to build their personal brand in the industry. So besides the soft skill, how to sell your project to stakeholders, how to manage your ML projects, how to give presentations. We'll also talk about the kind of updated industry reality and how people learn skills about personal branding, how to build influence. Maybe some people also want to teach a course, or maybe some people want to build their independent consulting service.
Nice. Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. On the note of your podcast and how you're not creating episodes as much these days, we had an audience question. So I posted, as I do with some of our guests as they're coming up, I posted a week before recording this with you that you'd be on the show, and does anyone have any questions? And we had Teslim, who he lives in the UK, and he interacts with a lot of our stuff online. He's won a bunch of our books when we do book giveaways.
Yeah.
So Teslim, thanks for all the engagement. Teslim Adiyanchu. And he said, this is another great guest I would love to listen to again. Meanwhile, I'm curious why Daliana's show hasn't been updated since April. We actually miss her good job on the show.
Oh,
So yeah, people are missing you out there, Daliana. But I guess that's part of the same journey, is it? That it's, I think actually, I heard you talk about this on the Last Week in AI podcast with Andrei
yeah.
Karenkov. You co-hosted that show a month or so ago, immediately after an episode where I co-hosted. So one of the regular co-hosts, Jeremy, was away.
Yeah.
And so I co-hosted one week, you were co-hosting with Andre the next week. And one of the things that you mentioned there was that you realized that you don't have to be, say, releasing an episode every single week. There's no law.
Yeah.
You don't have a contractual obligation to do
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, I think I around the time I stopped the podcast, there was one reason I felt burnout. I feel so tired, and I want to, figure out my focus. The one thing. Another reason is I joined my career coach. I don't know. Maybe she's a life coach cohort. So there was a 3 months session. It goes very deep. There's a lot of exercises, kind of inspires me to add more content to my own course because there are a lot of things, for example, how to advocate for yourself, talk about promotion. I can, literally give people scripts in the cohort, but there's a lot of things. Do you feel comfortable advocating for yourself? What are the limits you have. And through the coaching sessions, I realized I had a lot of fear to do something I really want to do. And then I have a lot of rules that I just assume is true in the world. For example, if you start a podcast, you have to keep going. Or if you studied science and engineer in college or have a PhD, you have to be a data scientist all the time. We kind of have all those rules for ourselves. And also the people during my some one-on-one coaching, there are a lot of people didn't study data science, but they have been doing practical machine learning hands-on work. And when I look at their resume, they have done a lot, but people constantly have this not enough feeling. And I know a lot of time when we have that feeling, some people call it imposter syndrome. I think it's very common in the data science practitioners because it's slightly different from software engineering. It's not like you build something, it works. A lot of times it doesn't work. And even if it works, it will never be 100%. There always this 1% you can improve. And your manager might ask you, oh, what if we do this? There's always a lot of what if. Your stakeholder have a lot of ad hoc requests. So a lot of data scientists, they're also scared to ask for a promotion. There are so many factors. So I can just list a few. A lot of us grew up from a culture where you don't advocate for yourself. You wait for the senior people to promote you, and then that culture, that mindset, kind of come along with us in the professional world. Or something I realized is, I think, for example, myself, I had a pretty happy childhood. During the coaching session, we talk a lot about healing work. And I felt I don't have anything to heal from. I'm happy. I don't have any trauma.
That's
But what
good.
I learned is we all have those wounds from childhood, or when we were a teenager, when we were very vulnerable, very sensitive. Maybe the first time you give a presentation, your parents or the teacher criticize you, or the first time you ask a stupid question in a classroom, the girl or the boy you had a crush on, they laughed at you. And those events can be like a wound for you in the future. Maybe consciously or subconsciously, you feel scared to speak up during meeting. I remember when I was maybe fourth year, when I was at Amazon. That was before I got promoted. I was asking my manager for feedback. The feedback he gave me really surprised me because I thought he was going to say something about technical skills. And he said, "Well, Daliana, most of the time when you voice your opinions, you're right, but a lot of time you're quiet, you're timid." So that feedback kind of shook me a little bit because I thought, well, I gave a lot of Amazon employees, engineers, product managers. I used to lead trainings on machine learning and A/B testing, decision making. I'm not afraid to be in front of an audience, and I can give presentation. I can be funny, but I would never associate with myself to someone called timid. And then what I noticed is it's not about, being able to speak. It's about, are you able to disagree with people? Do you feel comfortable to challenge someone's opinion? Maybe this person is more senior than you. So I think after that, I try to just have more awareness. If I have some opinion, not to suppress my opinion, try to speak up more in meetings. Also, sometimes even in personal relationships, if a friend, it's really hard, especially when it's a friend. If someone does something that make you feel uncomfortable, are you able to tell them? Or a coworker, for example, this happened to me, reschedule meetings 10 times. I feel this person doesn't respect me, but I also want to be nice. Those are the moments we need to stand up for ourselves. I forgot what I was talking about. I think the going back to the why I took a break, this career coaching journey, I noticed I had a lot of those type of fears. I didn't really believe, oh, I can transition from a podcast host to a career coach. It's just in my mind, I have that framework for myself. I'm a technical person. I'm a data scientist. I'm a technical podcast host. Although I have the desire to help people, even free content, I get a lot of people's DMs. I always like screenshot, put them in a folder in my phone. So sometimes when I feel less motivated, I look at those. I know I can do it, but sometimes now when I announce it to the world, it seems so natural to my audience, to my friends. But it was just myself, put myself in those cage. Yeah, I think a lot of times when people are still in a data science or machine learning role, when they think about, oh, can I do more Gen AI stuff? I didn't learn engineering. I did not have a degree in AI. Or maybe I want to be a product manager. Or I also have friends become a startup founder, or someone completely left data scientist to do real estate, and they're happy. So I just feel there's so many stories I can tell, and then there are so many things I learned I can share with other people to empower them to choose a career path that works for me, advocate for themselves, to give them that courage and
Mhm.
strategies.
Yeah, I think that's great. So I think to kind of recap, two of the main things you're saying here are that there are these two kind of common career mindsets that I certainly experience a lot. I'm sure a lot of our listeners are impacted by maybe both of these to a huge amount. And the first one is that we assume lots of rules.
Yeah.
So, and I absolutely do that. I mean, we do this podcast twice a week, every single week of the year. And there have been periods where I'm like, this is crazy. Like, can I have a summer break or like a
Yeah.
Christmas break or something, you know? And we'll see. Maybe someday, somehow, I'll figure out how to shake that rule. For now, I'm okay with it. And I'm always really excited right now to be recording the 2 episodes every week. But there have been points. We were talking before we started recording, when we started finally monetizing this show,
Yeah.
after 5 years of running the show, 3 years ago, we started to monetize it with sponsor messages. And the first year I was finding the sponsorship myself to kind of test it out. And like you and I were discussing before we pressed the record button, some of that stuff was really helpful. You know, I learned a lot about negotiating and
Yeah.
pricing, building packages. That was really cool. But that was I was also super burned out with a full-time job as a co-founder of a tech company, finding sponsorship for the show and hosting the show. It was too much. And so luckily now we have Natalie on the show, who does that. Most of her time is spent. She works full-time on the show, and most of that time is spent on sponsor. Huge thing. Anyway, so yeah, so we assume these kinds of rules around how we need to be how we need to be living our life. I
Yeah.
like the one that you say there about, you know, if you have a technical degree, you assume that you need to keep doing something technical.
Yeah.
And I've experienced shifts like that in my life. My undergrad was in science. And so when I started my PhD, I had this idea in my head, you know, it's a science PhD as well. And I was like, okay, well, at that time, data science wasn't a career when I started my PhD.
Yeah.
Even when I finished it, I hadn't heard of it.
No.
But certainly at the beginning, like, you know, it didn't occur to me that there was a career like data science, but that probably would have been one of the things that I would have thought, okay, if I'm doing a PhD, applying machine learning to biological data science is probably one of the careers. So that's something I was certainly thinking today if I was starting a PhD. But I was kind of thinking in my head, like, okay, like I could work for a pharmaceutical company, or maybe I could do my MD after my PhD
Yeah.
and be like a medical researcher. But it
Yeah.
seemed to me like there were very few kinds of options out there. And a really interesting mind-opening experience for me was doing my PhD at Oxford. There's lots of companies, big banks, the big consulting firms like Bain, McKinsey, BCG, those kinds of companies. They're all like, oh, you know, we'd love people like you to come work with us. And that kind of opened my mind to like, oh, I could kind of be doing anything. I could be doing commercial things like being numerate and having programming skills, this is useful increasingly in basically any industry. And
Yeah.
so you have your pick as a technical person, but even then, it expands beyond that. Like you're saying, like if you figure out through the things that you're doing through talking to Uber drivers, Daliana, if you figure out through talking to them that wow, something that I'm really excited about is helping people with their careers,
Yeah.
there's no reason why you have to feel these rules. And anyway, I could go into a million examples myself as
Yeah.
well, where you feel constrained, you feel like you must go in a certain path, like, oh, I've come this far, I've got to keep going. Yeah. And then, so that was the first thing that you were talking about there. The other second, I think, really big key thing that you were talking about, there's this idea of wounds where, you have these things. And like you, I had a super happy childhood. I don't feel like I have any trauma to get over. But there are interesting things. Like when you were talking about that, I was reminded of how in my undergrad, I worked extremely hard. I wasn't a very hardworking high school student.
Yeah.
But when I was in my undergrad, I worked very hard. And there was this one comment, one of my best friends from high school said to me at the beginning of university, he was like, "You'll never get into med school." And when
Wow.
he was just like, he was just like, "You're not that kind of, you don't work hard enough. You can never get into med school. That's just not, that's not something that's an option." And so when I was working late or working on weekends when like I didn't feel like going anymore, it's so interesting. Him saying that in my head, I was like, I'm going to keep studying. And then eventually, like, I got myself in a position by the end of my undergrad where I definitely could have gone to med school. So it was it's interesting how it can, that person would never remember that they said that. It was such a
No.
random offhand comment. And it wasn't intended to be mean at all. It was like factual based on what he knew about me.
Yeah. And it motivated you. So at that time, that comment served that purpose, right? But what got you there now, right now, if you think about that comment, if you still, give that comment energy, it's not going to help you with your future career. That's going to make you feel, basically, that's another assumption. If I don't work super hard, if I don't burn myself out, I won't achieve the result I want. So maybe sometimes you don't feel, sometimes we also associate with the amount of work we produce and our self-worth, our job title. So all those, I think you brought a very good point. I think a lot of time it's not black and white. What is it? Not black and white, black and white.
Black and white. Yeah.
We all read a story.
Something I wanted to say is that, I think you, based on your LinkedIn profile, I don't know this about you for sure, but it seems like you grew up in China, you lived in China until the end of your bachelor's degree, and then it looks like you came over to the US to UC Irvine to do a master's. Is that right? That kind of timeline?
Yes.
And so, first of all, your English is unbelievably good. And then the second thing is that you do amazingly well is you are so funny. Like you said it kind of earlier, how like, in meetings or in trainings that you were doing at AWS on machine learning for people, how you can be funny. And you're very funny. And that to me is also like, that is one of the things it shows that somebody has a really great command of a language when you can be funny. Like, I don't think there's some other languages that I can speak a little bit, but there's no way I could be funny in them.
Oh, thanks.
Maybe I'm not funny in English.
Yeah, maybe I can share a little bit. I think when I first moved here in my first job, I had a position in a small, medium-sized company in LA. So I was their first business intelligence data analyst. I think that was the title. Basically, maybe now it's a data scientist role, a generalist. And I noticed I need to give presentations to a lot of people in marketing and sales, and sometimes they don't understand me. So then I realized, I need to, speak better English to work on my accent. So I think maybe that was the first time I ever invested in like a non-technical personal development. So I follow this English YouTuber. I think she still runs it, called Rachel's English. And she has a partner. They give people English accent lessons. So I hired this guy. I think he went to Harvard, has some degree in acting. So I would record myself. He gave me critiques. I think that's probably one of the like very high ROI investment that I had. Once I learned about those accents, and then also helped me better understand other people. Another kind of unconventional self-growth thing I did was actually when I lived in Seattle, I took a comedy class because I realized if you can make people laugh in presentation, it's easier for them to learn. It also builds a better rapport with people. And in my class, I think most people are native speakers. And then in the final kind of quote unquote presentation, you actually have to go to a local theater in Seattle. And we all, sell tickets to our friends. So people are paying and you're performing. So I remember I practiced really hard and I didn't need my notes. And then there are people after the show tell me I'm funny. So that gave me a lot of confidence. And I feel those are the things, if you say, hey, how to grow your career, nobody will say, hey, take a comedy class, take a communication course. But I don't know how to directly map that to later. For example, I joined the team in AWS where it's customer facing. I'm comfortable, talking to people, giving presentations, and now hosting my own podcast. But I feel it's all looking back, connecting the dots. I think those experiences are actually more valuable, maybe, compared to a technical course I took.
So I'm gonna really quickly ask you. I'm gonna ask you some more kind of career tips that you have for our audience, following on some of the things you just said. But really quickly, something that I kind of want to draw a line under is based on the conversations you and I were having before we started recording. It sounds like you might be getting ready to publish more Data Scientist Show episodes. Is that right?
I mean, I already promised I'll interview you. I'll have at least one more episode.
Okay,
So
nice.
to be transparent, I think I will continue to publish podcasts, but I might change the name of the podcast or start a new podcast. Just call it Daliana's show or something
Mhm,
like that.
mhm.
Because what I learned about myself is might not feel super motivated to be a full-time content creator, but I think content creation is a byproduct to whatever I'm doing. I need to have another thing going on. So I remember, I think I really enjoyed content creation when I was a data science practitioner. So now I think I would still interview data scientists. I would talk to a lot of hiring managers or maybe other people who successfully transitioned in data science roles, have unconventional career paths, maybe from they had a full-time job, now they become a independent consultant. Maybe they become a writer or they have a few things going on. So I will probably continue the podcast, but have a diversified topic focusing more on personal growth for data science and AI practitioners.
Nice. Well, that makes a lot of sense, and I could see how that happens. I guess how yeah, I guess it makes sense to me that you might want to kind of generalize a little bit away from the data scientist show. Now that you're not doing that as a full time day job, and being. I imagine, although it sounds like the coaching that you're doing right now is particularly helpful to people in technical roles like data science, software developer, those kinds of roles. I can imagine that over time that could kind of broaden and broaden and broaden. So it makes
Yeah.
but yeah, while we are on this super data science podcast, and for as long as it is called this, there's no plans to change that, but
No.
maybe someday we'll have to think about that as well. And yeah, so in your experience advising AI companies and coaching data scientists, we already talked about two of them. So maybe you've already kind of answered this question, like maybe the rules and dealing with these kinds of wounds or feedback from the past. Maybe those are kind of your big kind of challenges and obstacles that you encounter. But I don't know if maybe you have some others, like other common career challenges that you see amongst the data scientists and related professionals that you coach, and how do you guide them over those obstacles?
For example, a lot of times when people want to explore, oh, maybe I want to do more machine learning or want to get into Gen AI, the question they ask me, oh, what courses should I take? What books should I read? I think a lot of times people are so deep in their own head. The question they ask might not serve their growth. I think the most important thing is to understand what's the day-to-day of the role you want to get into. Something simple you can do right away is, for example, I always ask people to research 10 job roles to analyze what is the required field, what are the skills they need. Instead, it's not a kind of nice to have, because the nice to have, people just put everything there. And it can range from big tech companies to startups. And also sometimes maybe you can just search, try to stalk 10 people on LinkedIn with the same title you desire, to look at their career path. How did they get there? And just talking to people in your company, your friends, or do some cold outreach on LinkedIn to do a lot of research. And I think the best way to transition is always to do that within your company or in your team, when you already have trust built with your manager or stakeholder or someone going to write a review. So one thing I always talk about in the course and coaching is to build trust. That's the foundation for your manager to want to give you project with bigger scopes, to help you with promotion, give you a raise, or later help you transition into other roles. So I think it's not about the course, the skills you need to learn. It's more about like understanding the other role. So maybe you already have that skill set. Think about what project do you need to do to get in there. And another thing I think people don't think about is, a lot of times being a data scientist, machine engineer, the title can be very glamorous in the outside, but you don't know how our project is being evaluated. I think about the performance metrics is also very important. So, for example, there are different teams. They focusing on how many models you put into production. There are teams they also care about publishing like research, patents, paper. And on the day-to-day level, if you work in a large company like Meta, maybe you don't need to build a model from 0 to 1. They're already very mature model you can use. So basically, you need to I joked with my friends, so basically they're like config engineers. You just need to figure out what like type of parameters, experiments you need to do, and then it's very heavy on the engineering skill. Is that something you really enjoy doing? Or if you're in a smaller company, maybe you need to think about the stages of their data product. Do they have enough data? Is their data good enough? Are they ready to build their first product? If you really enjoy that kind of from 0 to 1 stage. And then that's also not enough. A lot of times in my work, you might notice there's a stakeholder from another team. This person later left the company, and then sometimes those projects get dropped. What is this team's relationship with their stakeholders? Do you have funding from your VP or another team? So there's always so many things beyond the technical skill you need to understand when you work in a role, especially for data scientists. Sometimes your manager is a software engineer or product manager. When you think about a role, a team, you need to understand what exactly the dynamic are there. Talk to a lot of people, so especially understand the struggles in this role. And I'm talking about this not in a way to intimidate people to get into data science, machine learning, or transition their career, but I think you need to have a kind of holistic view of a role before you think about how to get there, how to transition. Or sometimes I suggest people to do interviews with some roles that's not their dream job, so you get a practice, you get a feedback from the hiring managers, from the recruiters, to know what kind of interview question do you need to practice, instead of just in your own imagination. So that's one thing. If we have time, there's another thing. I think a lot of times data scientists and machine learning engineer, they are artists. So what is artist? Well, artists create art from their heart. They want to perfect that craft. They want to improve the performance from 90% to 91. They want to build a perfect platform that maybe in the future other people can use. I think those desire to be a perfectionist is great. But in a lot of times, you work for a company, your team think about there is a timeline, and there's conversations about cost. So maybe improve that model by 1 or 2% is not that important, but maybe you need to think about comparing costs. I'm just example, maybe OpenAI, Anthropic, which one is cheaper when you call those APIs, which one can reduce latency. So a lot of those things and go into the engineering aspect of things. And sometimes you also need to think like a product manager. So it doesn't matter how good your model is, if you're a stakeholder, especially if they're non-tech, if they don't understand your model, they don't trust you, they don't trust the model, they're not going to use it. If they don't use it, you don't have impact. You don't have anything to put on your resume when you look for a job or when you want to have that promotion conversation. So I think data science and engineers need to get out their head a little bit to really think about how this model is going to be used. And when you deliver this model to your stakeholder, do you know your stakeholder has stakeholders? Your stakeholder, if you can make your stakeholders' life easy, if you can understand what metric your stakeholder care about, then it's easier for you to get buy-in from your stakeholder. And also sometimes maybe machine learning isn't the solution, or sometimes it's a dashboard. Maybe you need to spend more time to collecting data. I think it's also very interesting as a data scientist. I think sometimes it's kind of philosophical. You need to be in the craft, but you also need to have this non-attachment to the craft, because sometimes maybe the best decision is not to launch the model. If you're in a team, do you have a manager that understands this type of situation and provide a psychological safety for you to try things or understand sometimes things don't work, or when an A/B testing failed, when this feature is not launched, what can you learn? What other things you can get from this project that will still be useful for your team? So I think from this artist mindset to think like a business owner, think like a product manager, think about time, think about cost. And sometimes, especially with the hallucination of language model, think about your company, your team's legal, PR, security. So I think you have to have this almost entrepreneurial mindset to be a good data scientist.
That makes so much sense to me. So to kind of recap some of these key career mindsets that you see, the challenges that they encounter and the solutions that you have, there's I already kind of recapped on the assumption of rules that people have. We talked about the wounds that people have from feedback. But then since then, some of the great tips that you've given are around what the day-to-day of your dream role is like. So understanding that day-to-day role. So titles, something like data scientist, that could mean so many different things. And I have a follow-up question for you on that in a second. So really understanding what is going to happen in this role is key. And a lot of that can have to do with the stage of the company that you're at. You gave some great examples there when you were explaining that. Another big thing is thinking about what the commercial impact of a project will be. So being entrepreneurial, not just being technical, but thinking about costs, legal issues, security issues, and then having, that whole entrepreneurial mindset lead to great data science developments that can be, say, incorporated into a product or into a business and drive commercial results. And that is the kind of stuff, more than anything, that is going to be key to future promotions or landing your next big job. Yeah, I agree. Cool. All right. So I just said that I was going to have a follow-up question. And so my follow-up question is that when, a data scientist, kind of any stage in their career, they could be early, they could be late, the field moves so quickly. Maybe they aren't even a data scientist yet. They're listening to the show and they're thinking about becoming a data scientist in the future. The field moves so quickly. The title data scientist tells you very little about what you're going to be doing in that role. It could involve any number of, building a model from scratch. That's kind of like the dream that a lot of people think they're going to be doing in data science, but probably doesn't often happen. A lot of it is data cleaning, data engineering, machine learning engineering, getting things into production, ML ops.
Yeah.
There's so many different things, creating reports, creating dashboards. There's hundreds of different possible kinds of jobs in this title, data scientist. And so given that, there's a couple of, I expect these kinds of things that you encounter in your career trainings. What advice do you give to people when they're unsure what direction to take. So, they're like, okay, I want to be a data scientist. Like, I want to be a data scientist, or, I already am a data scientist, but, there's these other things that I could be doing. How do you, when somebody's unsure of what direction to take, as say a data scientist or a machine learning engineer or a software engineer, how do you help them find a niche that they're passionate about and that is aligned with their value and where they'd like to go in their career?
It's interesting you mentioned niche. I think a lot of times when people tell me they want to be a data scientist or machine learning engineer, it might not be what they really want. Sometimes it's they're following this hype. It's not really their strength, or they're only aware of a few job options. So, for example, later I talked to my friends in recruiting. There's also data scientists in finance. Their job titles are like quant, or even a trader. If you're very quick at math and statistics, you can be a trader. And those roles has probably a little bit more stress, but you probably make double or triple a data scientist salary. So a lot of people are not aware of those roles. So usually I will kind of going back to this person's background. So another example is had someone had a one-on-one with me. He had experience in doing government contracts, and I know to do those roles you need a security clearance, and a lot of people who are immigrants cannot do those type of roles. So for this person to transition, there's some niche. Maybe you can look for data scientists in public sectors. So all those large companies like Google, Amazon, IBM probably have those sectors. So usually it's kind of personalized. I want to find out what they have done before, how can they leverage their past in your future roles if they are not resisting that part. Another thing is I'm kind of going one step back. I always ask them, why do you want to transition? A lot of people say, oh, I'm passionate about like model and stuff. Sometimes it's like the story you tell recruiters. But when I have conversation with people I, coach, it can be honest with me. Sometimes, I just want to make more money, or I want that title. I think it's cool. My immigrant parents want me to have that job. And some people, they don't have a strong desire to have to be in that role. They're more flexible. And I think there are different stage in people's life. Maybe in this stage of your life, you do need to make more money, or maybe the current stage of your life, your parents' approval or your spouse approval is important for you, and I think that's okay. I think it's to be honest with yourself. If you want to pursue the job that make those money, and I can help you with that, and then I will try to get them to be honest about what they really want and their strength and weakness. Again, a lot of people kind of go into the route of what course do I need to study out, understanding the day to day. And if you do need to interview an external company, understand what is going to be asked in the interview. So one shift I notice is for data scientists and machine learning engineer, there are more kind of lead code questions in the interview. Because if you think about it, I joke about it with my friend. AI engineer is basically API engineer, API ensembler. Of course, there are more things under the hood. You need to understand those metrics, how to evaluate them. But a lot of times the models become better and better. What you really do is just put them together. Also similar for data scientists. No one is creating a regression model or tree or neural network from scratch anymore. You can do that once when you're learning. I think it's helpful for you to learn the skills, but in reality, we don't do that anymore. So are you familiar with the APIs, the tools, if you think about PyTorch, TensorFlow, or there are a lot of ML ops tools. You can also just config engineering, run experiments. So I think focus engineering skills is important, but that's kind of comes after you realize what is role actually is required. And I think also understand after 3 or 5 years, where do you want to go? Do you want to be a specialist? Do you want to find your niche, or do you want to be a generalist? I think unless you have a strong desire in niche, you can go into it. But I think right now, especially if you work in the industry, our work is focused on the problem. I know a lot of my coworkers previously in their PhD, they're doing research on NLP or computer vision, but now they're doing something completely different. I think it's important to have a sense of curiosity, want to learn. I think it's okay to hold on to the area you're very interested in, but also open to kind of other roles. I think you don't have to be a generalist in a way that, oh, you're doing all type of engineering or web design, but I think it's helpful sometimes. Maybe it's easier for your stakeholders to play with a model if you can create a little demo using, I don't know, Streamlit or
Yeah, Gradio.
yeah, things like that. So I would say if you're confused in your career, I think based on your past and where you want to go, have a few options, but those options better not like too far apart. I think the easiest for you to get into, I think is the best way to go. Also, I notice sometimes people are like, okay, I have done my research, I talked to people, I want to be a product manager, but maybe the best way for me to do is to be like a data scientist, product data science, and then transition. So a lot of people, they kind of want to zigzag into another role, but I think that can waste you a lot of time. If you already certain you want to go into the role, I think the best way, first principle thinking, to think about how do you get into that role directly. Because when you get into intermediate role, you're not really present. You don't really enjoy that. You think about how to get there. But this roles day to day can take a toll on your energy, and then you might not have time to prepare for another role. So when I got into Amazon, my title was business intelligence slash statistician. I think that's basically what data scientists do, but there wasn't the title of a data scientist. And in my first job before Amazon, I wasn't specialized in A/B testing, but I was open to the opportunity. And then over the year, when I got into it, I thought it was really fun to advise product managers, engineers to make decisions. So kind of I stumbled into this niche. And later on, I got curious about machine learning. I want to learn more about machine learning, deep learning. So I made that transition. And then now when I look at my career, okay, I've done a lot of experimentation, product data science. I also have done machine learning, and that make me a generalist. So a lot of things, it's not, things happen. Your interest change is not exactly as you're planned. So I think also don't plan too much ahead. Be flexible. I think that's also very important.
Nice. Yeah. So to kind of recap on some of the key points that you made there. So my question was kind of about how you find your niche under that big data science title umbrella. And you started off by answering that the question that people need to be asking is what they really want.
Right.
So, being honest about that, because like you say, a lot of people, they have their job interview answer prepared about what they're passionate about.
Yeah.
When in reality, they just want more money, or they want their parental approval or their spousal approval,
Yeah.
or whatever. And so it sounds like, that honesty and realizing that there could be related kinds of jobs, like you mentioned quants there, but maybe it even means that, somebody should be thinking about like career coaching,
Yeah.
even though they have a technical background. Like there's a huge range of possibilities out there. You don't do yourself a service by having a rule
Yeah.
that says, oh, data scientist is whatever, the sexiest job of this century. That's what I want. When maybe when you're actually doing it isn't what it seems. Now, one thing that's interesting is that you said there that nobody actually makes models anymore, like regression models, random forest. It is interesting that is still at my company, Nebula. That is something that we do still do. We
Okay.
do make models from scratch.
Let me clarify. We still use regression, XGBoost. What I'm saying is we're not coding the algorithm. So actually
Yes, yes,
that's a
yes.
big kind of confusion right now in the market. People are like, oh, everything is Gen AI because those content get hyped up in social media. And as a content creator, now I know a lot of people, content creator, create those content because it will get them views. But in the industry, still a lot of people are using XGBoost, a logistic regression. And I talked to a few friends, they work in more traditional industry. They're not using any LLMs, especially you're using your customer is a business, so you're a to B business. I think if you're to C business, it makes sense. You can create some chatbots for your customer if you have a lot of documents. But to see if most of your feature are numerical, or those use cases where requires a lot of transparency, model interpretability, people are still using, I guess now people say traditional ML, or deep learning.
Yeah. Exactly. Okay, cool. I'm glad we clarified that because yeah, then now we're definitely on the same page.
Yeah,
Yeah, it is interesting how because of all the hype around Gen AI, there probably is an assumption that that is a lot of what data scientists do. Now, if you are a data scientist working with Gen AI, that is a scenario where you probably are mostly actually using already trained foundation models,
yeah,
certainly to prototype. There could be some circumstances where it makes sense to download like Llama 3 model weights and fine tune that using LoRa or some other parameter efficient
yeah,
and actually run an LLM on your own infrastructure. But most of the time, you don't need that. Most of the time, you can be relying on an existing foundation model, and the tooling just gets easier and easier and easier every month to
yeah,
kind of the middle layer to, if you are, as you say, so to Daliana uses the term to B or to C, and that's like business to business or business to consumer. So a B2B business is serving other businesses as the primary customer. And a B2C business, that's the direct to consumer kind of product. And so it is interesting. And, you spent a lot of time in the Bay Area. And so
yeah,
in the Bay Area, you only build B2B SaaS companies. Like that's like it.
right.
But there's this small sliver of very brave entrepreneurs that are trying to build. Because if you can get a B2C business to work, those can end up being some of the most well defended in terms of having a moat companies out there that end up being the most valuable. So if you think about like Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp, LinkedIn, these are platforms that are, they were created initially to serve a consumer as opposed to a big enterprise client. And then once you have all of these users and you have all these data and you have this huge moat, then you start figuring out how to monetize.
Right.
Anyway, I'm off on a tangent, but so most companies are B2B. And yes, you're saying with the Gen AI thing, yeah, if you're building B2B, most of that work still is probably going to be not generative AI. There's probably somebody or many people in management of the company that are saying, why isn't the data science team working on Gen AI? And maybe you do some small pet projects, some prototyping, but because of the cost, because of legal issues, hallucination, it can end up being maybe move as quickly with B2B applications of Gen AI. Anyway, off on some tangents here. All right, so one last question for you in this direct topic area around the data science title and how it can be so nebulous. So data science is constantly evolving. And that's part of also what makes the data science title kind of tough because if you're in a data science role for many years, what you're doing 3 years from when you started the job is likely to be very different because the underlying tools change. Maybe now you are fully immersed in building Gen AI things, which you
Yeah,
wouldn't have dreamed was maybe even possible in your lifetime when you started the data science role. And now you're like, wow, I can just have my users put a natural language question in and have any answer come back. And 99% of the time, it's like exactly what they wanted and it's calling my APIs. And so these kinds of crazy, completely paradigm changing things can happen in a data science career. And because of this fast evolution, it can be fertile territory for things like imposter syndrome, which you mentioned some time
yeah,
ago, for distraction, for just how do you know if you're following the right thing? You could end up spending so much time learning some programming language or some tool, and because it seems like that's going to be the up and coming thing, but then something else comes along, like maybe you this is this is an unfair example to TensorFlow because TensorFlow is still quite widely used, but what if you're like, wow, deep learning is going to be big, you spend all this time learning. Actually, a really good example is before TensorFlow 2,
yeah,
TensorFlow was like this very cumbersome, very complex thing. You're kind of working at the graph level, and so you can invest like a whole bunch of time becoming expert at that. And then they released TensorFlow 2, and all of that is abstracted away. And like, and so maybe it ends up being helpful to you in some kind of indirect way, but you kind of feel like you've wasted all this time. So imposter syndrome, distraction, and of course burnout, which we've already talked about earlier, because of this constant evolution, this kind of feeling like no matter how fast you move, you're seeing things move faster. And this can happen with data science skills. I think it can also happen if you're more entrepreneurially minded, which could be internally, like that could be the kind of data scientist entrepreneur mindset internally that you were talking about earlier, or you could be literally an entrepreneur. For me, as a co-founder of a tech company, I'm like, wow, we need to be taking advantage of these Gen AI things. And I see every day these crazy valuations or crazy amounts of ARR that somebody else managed to capitalize on, say, this Gen AI thing faster than me or more effectively than me. And I'm like, and I, have this constant feeling of being so far behind.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, so imposter syndrome, distraction, burnout. How can the people that you mentor,
Mhm.
how can our listeners, I guess, same question, how can we build confidence and resilience through all of this change and all this challenging learning?
Yeah, that's a really good question. The learning tools and then feel you wasted your time. I remember when I just started, joined the machine learning solutions lab in AWS. I took some courses in like PyTorch, TensorFlow, and AWS we use Glue on CV. And then I also feel, oh, did I wasted my time? But later you read your coworker's code, you understand what is it about. I think because we're in science engineer, we have this desire to optimize things, right? Especially what I notice is I think engineers really like to make their own coffee, make their own coffee art. I think it's good to, have the desire to optimize things to be productive. But if you think about your career and the life, it's rarely a linear growth. I think first is to let go of the desire. Oh, I have to have the shortest path, the quickest path to get a promotion. And if you sometimes, I think there's no optimized way to learn. I think it's learn whatever is needed for your current project. And I know now there's so many papers coming out. There are new tools every single day, and you don't need to be on the forefront of using all the tools, understand the papers. You know who needs to do that? Only those tech YouTubers need to do that. They need to talk about the newest thing. But if you work for a company, that's me, and then some of my coworkers adopt. It's okay to be a little bit late. So whatever is working right now, you can continue to use it, but always be open to keep an eye on the new tools. If you think about putting things, especially in production, you want to use a tool produced by a company that has been there for a while. If you think about SQL, probably not going to go anywhere. That's pretty robust. When you think about what things to learn, again, coming back to your goal, your short-term goal, your long-term goal, is this tool needed in your current project? And also, I think sometimes it is useful to be curious, to want to adopt a new tool. So, for example, use the best way to get into Gen AI, learn build LM application, I think, is to build a small app for yourself using some OpenAI API. Just think about how to apply those things instead of focusing on those noise. And yeah, it's never enough, I think. But if you have a goal to think about what you want to achieve in the next 3 months, and I also think it's barrier people talk about anti-goal. I think how I think about it is just have a list of things you can't learn. I remember when I was learning computer vision for a project at that time, there are also a lot of like NLP things coming out. I think, yeah, I am curious. Maybe how I learned those, I just watch like a short YouTube video on it, and or I listen to John explain it on Super Data Science podcast. I don't have to, read a textbook. So I preserve my energy to what I need to do at that moment. And I think so kind of going back to your goal, and then just know that no researcher is always kind of reading new things, trying new things. Most of the things are gonna be outdated in 6 months. It's not very useful. And for that feeling of not enough. I think a lot of times what we need to develop also is the self trust, the self confidence. Previously, we talked a little bit about kind of those wounds, some other people's comment. I have this idea. I'm always very excited to share. I never talk about it. If you think about LSTM or some language models, they always have those forget gate. They will retain only the most relevant information, put it on this highway in each cell, and then retain that because that's productive. But for human, we retain information not because it's useful for us. Sometimes it's because it triggers a very intense emotion. Sometimes it's fear, shame, sadness. And then we carry that information, right? Also, when you first meet someone, the first impression is, if you think about it, it's crazy. It's assigned a very irrational weight in our head. I really wish in my head there could be something I can rebalance that weight of some first impression of someone. I can update this impression because people change, or I can have my own forget gate. I forget those kind of quote unquote wounds I have. I think in this way, the language models are more intelligent than us. So I think for us is to, I think for me, journaling is very helpful when those moment of doubt we have. Maybe we cannot get rid of the information like having a forget gate, but having the awareness, oh, this fear, I'm in a better place right now. I have a degree. I have done those projects. I think having a documentation, kind of, I can call it like a brag log. Every time your manager, your customer give you some positive feedback, or you finish successful project, or it could be just this very small bug that took you 2 days, you finally debugged it. You put it in a document. So later those are the information you want to carry on LSTM cell. You don't want to forget. But I think a lot of times we don't give us credit. We are very self critical, which if you think about it, it's not fair. You're not giving those positive feedback a proportional weight that's helpful for your future success. And another story, if I have time, I'd like to share is when I was in AWS, there was a project that has a very unique goal that was to prove to our customer the art of possible of machine learning. So the goal was to build a demo because we want to build more machine learning project for them, but they didn't really have buy-in of investing in our services in compute. So after I built, me and my coworker built a solution for them. Later on, I think I want to write my maybe annual review. I wasn't sure whether that project I implemented with the engineer in the production, but I wasn't sure whether it was used because I want to get the kind of business metrics to kind of support this project. And then I feel I have the imposter syndrome, kind of those doubts kicking. Oh, if the customer are not using it, did that actually make an impact? Is it because I didn't do enough, so they're not actually using it? And then my manager told me something I often kind of try to remember. She said, the goal of that project was to show them the possibility. We were to build a model. I think it was already great. We tried to put it into the production. So you reach this goal and it was good enough. And I think hearing that from a manager was very reassuring. It made me realize, okay, I did achieve the success for that project. Different projects have different goals. And I think a lot of times when we evaluate ourselves, we don't give ourselves that credit. Maybe your manager is very critical. Maybe you are very critical for yourself. I think to have confidence, to have the courage to later advocate for yourself, to take on bigger project, is to remember, have this brag log of what you have achieved, and also remember the goal of the project. It doesn't have to be perfect, but maybe the goal of the project is to improve a model from 60% to 70%. Right, 70% is not like a super high, percentage of accuracy, but it's good enough. You beat the status quo, and then that's a win that you need to celebrate. I remember when I just started to building a machine learning model, I was just googling like Redis, Stack Overflow, what percentage is good enough? And then I realized there's no universal answer. You have to know, having a baseline. It's like so important. Know the baseline so you know whether you have succeeded or not. I think a lot of us listening to the podcast probably always want to improve ourselves. I think it's good that you always want more, but I think at the same time you can give your credit and then celebrate the success, and then feel worthy of wanting to have more, be rewarded.
Yeah, lots of great, useful nuggets in there for people of any career, though also some ones that are really great for people in data science specifically, like that idea of what's a good accuracy or what's a
Yeah,
good area under the curve, the ROC curve for this particular binary classification model or whatever. And there's no right answer because some problems are way harder than others. Some
yeah,
of them, maybe it's going to be trivially easy to have your binary classifier be perfect, like essentially every time. And then other situations where that same where a binary classifier, it's like, if you want to build an algorithm that's going to predict whether this stock is going to go up tomorrow or go down tomorrow, it's like if that can work 52% of the time, you might be a billionaire. Like if you can scale that up, in a hedge fund, like that's like those are the kinds of things you're looking for. You're looking for just tiny, tiny, tiny little bits of edge, because so many other people in the market are already taking advantage of all the signals that are out there. So yeah, really interesting that you said those. Something that I wanted to get back to that we were talking about a lot in the first part of the episode. In the first part of the episode, we were talking a lot about your own content creation journey, and we also talked about your Maven course. And my apologies, I only have written down this the title of what it used to be, like Advance Your Data Science Career with Proven Strategies. Remind me what the new Maven title is.
survive and thrive in data science in the
Survive and
age of
thrive in data
internet.
science.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So yeah, as part of that curriculum, a lot of what you teach is related to this idea of being entrepreneurial. So helping data scientists and probably related kinds of professionals, ML engineers, software developers, to build and influence, to show impact, to sell projects internally. And so there's a lot of content out there that focuses on hard skills, and it seems like these kinds of trainings, this kind of content on political maneuvering and marketing yourself effectively internally, it's huge for career success, as I'm sure you know as a career coach.
Mm.
And I agree with completely. And so I'd love to dig into that a little bit more here. I guess what are some of the kinds of key tips that you have for people if they want to be, I mean, with some of these things we already talked about in your earlier answers. So things like, being mindful about cost, being mindful about legal issues, security issues, all those kinds of things. Things like creating a demo in Streamlit or in Gradio, those kinds of tools make it easier to sell something internally because people can kind of click
Yeah.
around and try it and like use maybe a simple model that you built to prove some point. When you're trying to build an MVP model, you can have those MVP models surfaced inside of these apps, inside of these like simple apps. Radio apps can take seconds to build, and you could show those off. So those are some of the examples that you've already talked about that are great. But I don't know, I hadn't kind of explicitly asked you this question of whether you have specific kinds of tips or common mistakes that you see on these kinds of soft skills that are so important, building influence, marketing projects, selling them.
Yeah, you're talking about building influence. I think the common mistake is just not trying at all. A lot of people feel I don't have anything to showcase, or people would think build relationship people is like politics. To me, I think politics it's a neutral word. Maybe we don't like it. We can call it build a relationship with people. I think previously I mentioned a little bit why it's important. For example, when I was in a team at Amazon in Seattle, I had a mentor, and she just genuinely liked to connect with people. And sometimes we think building influence, meaning you have to be loud, you have to be super extroverted, always talk about your achievement, which is kind of off putting. She's very low key. She doesn't even give a lot of presentations. She still does, but she network with a principal engineer or scientist to know what they're working on. If she's interested, she will tell them, "Hey, this is my skill set. How about we work on this project together. So sometimes working with a senior or principal scientist can help you build more skills and or helpful for your promotion if that's what you care about. So basically, she doesn't wait for her manager to assign a project for her. She would mold her project on her own. Of course, you don't want to bypass your manager. Of course, I think she would get an okay from her manager when she does this. And also, she has this superpower. She became friends with the EA, the assistant of a director. So sometimes, if you want to, of course, as a IC, you don't really get FaceTime from director. But I think some of her project has that visibility, and then the EA would help her get into like a meeting, or sometimes, of course, the EA won't share anything confidential, but if that's just something okay to share, maybe what the director is kind of working on, what his focus, and that would be useful for her projects, right? Sometimes you work on a project, maybe your stakeholder uh, is moving to another team, or and you need to know who is someone going to take over, right? This person also need to be familiar with the metrics. You need to also get support from them. And if you don't know this, when your current stakeholders left, maybe the new person will abandon the project that you have been working on for the past year. So I think building those relationship, this network at work is very important, and you have to be genuine. I have definitely been on a side when I feel someone asked me to do something for them, or act very friendly, but later I found this person kind of just is very not even transactional, it's just one-sided. When they use me, I help them interview some people, give them some advice on their project, but later on this person kind of just disappeared, or pretend they don't know me very well. So there's a way to build relationship at work and also be genuine. And also you need to know that everyone is busy. You don't always have to say network with a director. Sometimes maybe the director is your stakeholder, but the person, maybe there's a senior engineer on the team that's you collaborate with more often, and then just build a relationship with this engineer. When I say build a relationship, maybe just have some schedule some type of sync up with this person, and then also be curious about this person. Hey, what are the projects you're working on? Know whether they have enough capacity to invest your current project, or maybe go look at this person's LinkedIn. What's their background? Maybe they studied, I don't know, mechanical engineer. You also study mechanical engineer, and then there's something you can bond. I think it's just a lot of times people have this fear about kind of networking, or they would feel, oh, I'm a scientist, I'm an engineer, those things are below me. They have this ego, this pride. They don't do this type of thing. So besides the things you can do interpersonally, there's also things you can do. For example, you can say, oh, I recently done this project. It could be very simple. You use your internal tool, you automated some process. Maybe it's not data science or ML related at all, but it will help your team's productivity. Maybe you can ask your manager, hey, how about we do like a lunch and learn session, and you can showcase your work, or you can submit to some internal conference. There are other ways for you to build influence, or something very simple. Maybe you get a lot of requests from your stakeholder side, you can host a training for them, you can do an office hour. So there are a lot of ways that you can build influence.
Nice. Yeah, those are all great tips. I think the main takeaway that all of us have is become BFFs with executive administrators. Being That's the key. Then you're set. No, you have lots of other great tips in there as well. So being mindful of what your stakeholder is looking for, so that then even if your immediate stakeholder moves somewhere else in the company or leaves the company, your projects are likely to still get their budget and the attention that they deserve. I also like the point there about shaking the pride that some technical people have, that, this kind of relationship building is below me.
Yeah.
I'm just going to focus on being really good at my technical stuff, and that's good enough. And yeah, you could be missing out on a lot of opportunity, a lot of influence if you have that kind of pride. So great tips there. You're a content creator, obviously. And you've had this really successful podcast, The Data Scientist Show. You have over 250,000 followers on LinkedIn. People obviously really like your content. Do you think it's important, or what do you think the value is for people to create content when they're not looking to be a full-time content creator, like you eventually did kind of make that transition, but
Mhm.
just is it useful for people for furthering their career in general, either for getting promotions or for maybe landing their next job, to create content?
Yeah, a lot of people ask me this question. So simply answer, just for promotion, no. Your LinkedIn, how many followers, it has nothing to do with my promotion at work. If anything, sometimes I have to be actually more cautious at work to make sure I don't talk about anything confidential. I need to get the approval of HR. So actually, if you're not careful, what you do externally can create issues with your.
You could also imagine, I actually thought where you were going to go with that in terms of the being careful. I thought that you were going to say that you have to be careful that your full-time employer doesn't think that this content creation
Yeah.
is a distraction.
Yeah, definitely. I think it depends on how you position yourself. And if you aspire to be a content creator, you want to have a lot of followers. That's a different story. Maybe you don't need to care about what people think. And I think that's totally fine. But if your goal is to build your personal brand in the industry, I don't think your goal is to have a lot of followers. I think there are some people who are very respected in the industry. Maybe they just have, 1,000, 2,000 followers. But what they really enjoy doing is they will write blog posts. They will go to conference. I think there are different things for you to build your personal brand. Maybe you can have a YouTube channel. Again, with a goal not to become a YouTuber. You don't have to update weekly, but you can talk about a side project you have worked on, right? Maybe you have published it on Medium. So I always encourage people to, if you have a side project, have it on GitHub. If nobody can see it, that means it doesn't exist. And if you put it on your resume, make sure you have the link and it's updated so recruiters can find it. Especially now when people are recruiting people with AI skills, because it's so new and some recruiters don't know what to look for. But if you have built something they can see, they can play with, could be a blog post, the simple way for you to output your project, I think is very helpful. So I think it's less about the craft of content creation, the eyeballs you get, so whether when people search your name, can they find something that you think is useful for your career. I think when I started content creation, the goal was a little different. I think it was more like I just have this desire I want to share. I've seen so many misinformation about data scientist role. So my content, I think technical content versus career content in the beginning was like 50-50. But if your goal was to kind of grow your career, I think you can focus on the artifact, creating the artifact that other people can see. And instead of, you don't have to feel you have to constantly pumping out content. Also, people will ask me, oh, what platform is the best? Like 2024, should you do YouTube or LinkedIn or Twitter? I think whatever platform that's the easiest for you to get started and you can resonate, that's the best platform. Sometimes you might change midway. Again, I think sometimes the desire to optimize, finding the shortest way, sometimes is counterproductive. Using the data science mindset of experimentation. So sometimes I know probably a lot of you listen to this, you have 10 draft sitting there and you never had the courage to put it out because you fear, what if nobody reads it, what if nobody likes it? If nobody likes it, who cares, right? And if you think that's a little awkward on your profile, you can always delete it, you can edit it. I think a lot of time is just even for me right now, sometimes I still have a lot of fear when I put out content. I think that's normal. Instead of thinking, oh, I want us to have like a million views, just think of it's a little experiment you put out in the world. it's a little product you put out to gather data. Whether people like or comment is the data you can collect. And there's more I can talk about. For example, what is like the ratio you create for recruiters or for other people to notice. Or sometimes I think the best content is a quote unquote selfish content. I think maybe if you feel at work you have to think about the business impact, but you actually want to be an artist, you just want to create something for yourself. I think content creation is a great outlet. Maybe you just want to blog post talk about the career story or a specific technology that you don't get to use at work. I think that's also a great way. Think of it as a way for you to express yourself. Maybe just one person on the other side of the screen saw it and found it useful, send you a DM. I think that's a great win. You don't have to be famous. Actually, recently, I just shut down a website I created. It's called ensemble.careers. So maybe that's my first try to be a entrepreneur. I want to create this forum where people can ask a career question. Recently, I closed it because not a lot of people use it. I think probably have 30 people registered. Post most popular one have just over 1,000 views. However, there was one post I talked about. Someone asked, "What kind of data scientist should you be?" And I answered in that post. And then Amazon Science, the editor, found that post and then reached out to me and then wrote a feature story for me. And then now it's on Amazon Science. That post, the whole website I created or the post didn't have a lot of traffic, but just that one thing was found by the right person, and then that is like become a very important part for profile. Yeah, so I think in the beginning have a sense of play, to have fun, not have too much attachment, but I think have anything put out there is better than having the draft sitting there.
Yeah, exactly. It's about starting before you're ready and, being okay with feedback. And then generally people are nice. I think, you might get some people who are mean, but that's usually more on them than on you if that's happening out there. So, don't feel bad about, critical things that come out, and mostly just I think publishing on a schedule can also be a good idea. Like you say, like, once a month on this day, like that's like my deadline. And you maybe like even maybe your first blog post or first LinkedIn post as you start to do this can be, I am committing to do this so that like on this day of once a month, I will create something, and then you stick to that like it's your job, and pick something that's easy. Don't start by saying, I'm going to make 2 podcast episodes a week because that's like, it's not sustainable. So yeah, so great tips there. Hopefully there, if we have listeners out there that are sitting on those 10 drafts, publish them. You've got 10 months of content there following this kind of idea. And, even if just one person or two, it can be any small number of people. If they're positively impacted by that content, it can make a big difference. So it's not just about how much traffic you get or how many views it gets. And like you say, who knows, one piece of content like you had on that old site, gets picked up and it can make a big difference for you. And also just putting things in words really does help you figure out, where you're making assumptions and where you need to maybe shore up your own understanding of something. So it can be useful in its own right. But there's something about posting it publicly, like you writing for yourself, it doesn't have the same, you don't put the same level of rigor into fact checking, say, or into the quality of your writing than if you're publishing it. So that's all really good tips. Daliana, my last kind of topic area for you quickly, and we don't need to spend a huge amount of time on this, but you obviously see a lot in the coaching that you do. You have a tremendous amount of experience as a data scientist. And so I'm curious where you see the field going. So we've talked a lot in this episode about soft skills. Yes, very important. But I'm just curious, in addition to the soft skills, when you're doing career coaching, are there technical skills that you highly recommend people have in data science? Maybe this is related to what's coming, with generative AI being here, for example, with agentive AI coming and becoming more and more important. Are there particular skills, technical skills, that you recommend to our listeners?
Yeah, I think, again, previously we mentioned data science roles can be very different in different companies. So it depends on what you do. So, for example, my friends building forecasting models. So their work is not highly impacted by generative AI or large language models, although they do, some type of forecasting. You can use transformers. And there are other type of machine learning engineers. Maybe they work for a small, medium-sized company, and maybe they want to take advantage of some LMs, identify some low-hanging fruit. Maybe you can build some chatbot question answering tools for if you are like a to customer business. So I think again the most important thing is to identify the business use case, but you have to understand what are the technology, what's the possibility out there to identify the use case. So if you are in a more generalist role and you feel your company have a lot of documents, you can improve either the business use case, or I think a lot of times for data scientists is to improve the internal process. For example, maybe your stakeholder cut a ticket, maybe you can create some GPT bot to tag, put it into a certain category. I think right now a lot of AI LM tools are more like an intern you have. It can help you solve a lot of problems, create some project, but it's not good enough to rely on it as a advisor. So you still the person to make decisions. So I think if you and also my friends from hiring agencies tell me, so actually people are not hiring the title of AI engineer because it's very specific. At the end of the day, AI skills is just going to be part of engineering or part of machine learning engineers. So, but they still want people to have those skills. So when they hiring software engineers or machine learning engineers, if you have experience leveraging, say, OpenAI API to build an app, knows when to fine tune or use RAG. That's also important because a lot of times now when companies are hiring people, again, this role is new, the skill set is new. They don't exactly know what skill set they're hiring into. So you are a advisor. You need to tell your hiring manager what you think they should do with their data, with their business use case. Be familiar with like OpenAI or Anthropic, those APIs, fine tuning. But kind of based on my conversations with practitioners, the RAG use cases, chatbot, are more common than fine tuning because not every company have their own data or the data quality might not good enough. I think sometimes RAG is good enough. And also, when you think about using building those AI solutions, is connected to a database. So get familiar with some vector database, for example, Pinecone, and those things can be useful. And if you're interviewing for large tech companies, I think for data scientists, machine learning roles, requirement for software engineer is higher and higher. So previously, I think people ask questions about data manipulation in pandas or maybe like a simple lead code. Now I heard that data points, sometimes people will ask medium or even hard lead code question, which I think makes sense. Again, because models are become better and better. A lot of times, companies are thinking about scaling the solution, reducing the latency. So you need to like really be proficient in your software engineering skill. And for product data science, I don't think it has changed that much. Product data scientists or data analyst, BI type of roles have less requirement for like software engineering skills. Some might still ask you like lead code, simple question, but they want to make sure you know SQL. You can do similar type of data manipulation in pandas. I do have some data points. People tell me the questions about experimentation, A/B testing, is getting a little bit more difficult. Sometimes it could be like causal inference. I think it depends on the company you're interviewing. Again, if you right now your work is pretty demanding, it doesn't really get into the AI or LM side. Don't feel anxious. To focus on the tools that will make your current work easy, but in your spare time there are so many things to learn. To learn things doesn't mean you have to sign up for like a big course. You can read blog posts, just be aware of the possibility. So whenever you feel this specific tool or technology can be useful in your current workflow, and then you can learn at that time. It's not gonna be late.
Nice. Yeah, great answer. You had a lot more detail there than I was necessarily anticipating, but I should have anticipated that because you are a career coach. So, like you say, you get these data points and they're really useful. Some of the key ones that I pulled out from there are, if you want to, kind of having experience with generative AI APIs can be something that's useful. Building a chatbot, getting that app, a simple chatbot app, where you deploy the app yourself, that can be really valuable experience. Somebody potentially interviewing you, and also just pretty darn fun to build. You talked about database tools like Pinecone, software engineering skills that you can develop through tools like LeetCode online, SQL, of course, which we already talked about earlier in this episode, and Pandas. It all makes sense to me. There aren't any huge surprises in there, but it's nice to have these kinds of things reinforced, and especially these particular technologies like LeetCode, Pinecone. Those are useful for our listeners for sure. And I'll be sure to include links to those in the show notes. So we only had one other audience question here that I don't think we specifically addressed, but I think over the course of this whole episode, Harcharan, I hope you feel like we have answered your question. So Harcharan Kabe said he'd like to understand how the developments in generative AI, like LLMs, are shaping the job of data scientist. And so he asked, do you think data scientists might transition toward roles similar to AI ML engineers, while others may specialize in areas such as data strategy, ethical AI, or the interpretability of AI models? And I feel like based on everything you've said in this episode, Daliana, that it's safe to say that yes, there's going to be more and more specificity as we have more and more of these kinds of AI tools. As we have more and more tools for abstracting away the complexity of those, we're going to have more and more specializations develop. Where yes, people will be ethical AI experts more and more, interpretable AI experts more and more. But I think kind of to summarize a key point from this whole episode from you is that we also want to be mindful about what the day-to-day is really going to be like in a role and not necessarily just focus on the title.
If one thing I could interrupt, I think you're right on the there are more topics, specialization people can get into. But right now, my view is like I don't think practically there are going to be those titles with those specializations. So I think those AI skills specialization is going to be weaved into the current role. I don't think company can afford to hire different roles. So maybe those AI skills are going to be expected in data science, or I'm engineer. I remember a couple of years ago there's when ML ops was really hot, and there would be ML ops, but we don't see that much anymore. It's just software engineer working on ML platform or data scientist doing ML ops. So I don't think people, again, sometimes company will create those job titles. I think the job title doesn't matter. It kind of matter less and less these days when you look for jobs, focusing on the skill set.
Nice. Yeah. Very well said. And I agree 100%. All right. So, Daliana, you've been extremely generous with your time with me today. We've gone way over the scheduled slot that I had with you. So, thank you very much for that. Before I let you go, do you have a book recommendation for us?
I will share the book that I read from my career coach. Her name is Victoria Song. I found her coaching program through this book called Bending Reality. I highly recommend it. You can listen to the audiobook. She shared some tools and techniques for you to kind of understand yourself more, process your emotions, so resolve those blocks, so later you have the courage, the strategies to go for the thing you want to go. So that's a book that recently have a great impact.
Nice. Thanks for that, Daliana. So, yeah, very last thing that I ask all of my guests before I let them go is how we should follow you. We've gotten some sense already. The Data Scientist Show, maybe the Daliana Show in the future.
Yeah.
And obviously LinkedIn. I was checking, it's 200, as of today of recording,
Mhm.
280,000 followers on LinkedIn. So that seems like a safe place to follow you. Where else?
So you can also go to my website, dalianaliu.com. You'll find my course. You can join the waitlist through Maven. If you're not ready for the course, you can also join my newsletter. It's not a weekly newsletter, don't worry, no spam. You can get maybe longer career story or updates from me. Yeah, I think that's it. That's a lot of Daliana already.
Well, Thank you so much for coming on the show. It's been such a fun and informative time spending this time with you. And yeah, maybe we'll catch up with you again in the future on the program.
Yeah. Oh, I forgot to mention. I just created a discount code. If you find a course helpful for you, I am gonna create a code. I think it's Super DS. If you use a code to register the course, you get 20% discount.
For the Maven course,
For the Maven course, only for the Super Data Science listeners.
for Super Data Science listeners. Awesome. Yeah, we'll make sure that we get that in the show notes as well so that people can take advantage of that generous discount for our listeners. Thank you so much, Daliana. And yeah, catch you in a bit.
Thank you, John.